Matt McGrath, VP of Brand and Client Experience. I heard the whole thing that Mike said about me. He was being extra special nice. And I am here to talk about Apple in the enterprise as I've seen it from the Apple perspective. You know, when I started in the industry, I was working for a very PC-centric shop, as everybody was. It was the mid-90s. Apple was pretty much going out of business. And I learned the enterprise framework before I really learned how to work with Apple in the enterprise. And I'm going to share that experience with you today. And Kevin?
Hello, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kevin Eisen, and I'm going to share my experiences. Also, you know, actually working within AT&T early on when the iPhone first came out, and got to see how enterprises utilized that iPhone as their first like foray into how does an Apple device work in my enterprise, in my world. After that, I did work at Apple for a while, working with business teams and working with different groups, trying to understand how not only the iPhone but the iPad at that point, and then the Mac, how that came back to really be very representative of what it meant to be an enterprise with a great machine. So we'll get started right now and talk through how that might work for you.
All right. So Apple in the enterprise. I don't want to belabor the point that Apple is the biggest company in the world. It's the most profitable company in the world. And I think that in the enterprise space, we think of it as a consumer device. And Apple has always been very consumer-centric. But that, in the last 3 years, 4 years, has really changed. Apple's iOS, the iPhone, and the iPad have made up about 64% of global device activations in Q2 in the enterprise, and 76% in the enterprise. So it's 3/4 of the devices, the mobile devices that are being activated for big businesses, and are from Apple. The fact is, it's not a consumer device anymore. There are many different industries that aren't typically thought of as Apple-centric, that are kind of hoovering up the iPad, especially the iPad and the iOS devices. Healthcare, you get these devices in people's hands, and they can actually do their work right in the field where things are happening, and it makes data gathering real time, it makes decision making real time, and it kind of pushes the power down to the people doing the work rather than centralizing data and having kind of an old school management structure of central decision making. Manufacturing too, you get people on the manufacturing floor with iPads going out and seeing what's working and what's not. It replaces paper-based workflows that take time to gather data and enter data and all that. You can just do that right in the field. Education, which is, I think, traditionally known as a strong suit for Apple, they've kind of lost the battle there in the mid-2000s, and they've come back in the last 2 or 3 years very strongly there. So Apple is changing the way businesses operate in the world. I think that products aren't just being utilized by kind of creative agencies. It's not the marketing department in the corner anymore. It's everybody. It came back first in the C-suite, in the executive suite, where people were using Apple products at home. They got their Macs at home for their kids, and they were easy to use. The iPhone came out, and everybody got one. And then they came into work, and they wanted to do their work on the devices that they had in their pocket. So, like I said, Apple leads activations in many top industries. The biggest ones, of course, are public sector, education, and healthcare. But we're also talking about manufacturing. We're talking about transportation. Recently, IBM formalized a partnership with Apple that produced several platform-centric mobile applications that IBM Global Services is pushing into multiple large-scale organizations in kind of a very holistic way. Cisco is 20% max, and IBM just went from the traditional buy and own the equipment and push it out to your staff to BYOD, and is buying 200,000 Macs a year. So what does this mean in dollar sense? It's gigantic. So the mountain region, Denver, Boise, the whole center of the country here is $400 million in Q1 of 2015. That's not iPhones. That's Apple laptops, Apple desktops. If you added iPhones, it would be a multiple of that. West Coast spend is, of course, that's a traditional Apple stronghold, $671 million, again, not including iPhones. The New York region, New York City primarily, is $519 million. It's still not including iPhones. This is a gigantic part of Apple's business. I just saw today, Tim Cook was interviewed today, and he said that 25% of Apple's business currently is enterprise. which I think that number shocked me. I still sometimes am biased towards Apple as a consumer device as opposed to big business. And so what kind of businesses are spending what kind of dollars on what? About 32,000 business customers have an average Apple spend of $100,000 or more a year. So, $8,000 or $9,000 a month on buying new gear from Apple. And 3,500 customers with an average spend of $200,000 a month. These people are spending real money replacing all their devices, and primarily it's going to Apple at this point. So in June of last year, VMware published a result of why is Apple kind of spiking in the enterprise space. The number one reason by a far margin is user preference. People come in, they have Macs at home, they have an iOS device in their pocket, maybe their grandmother has an iPad, and they say, hey, this stuff that I know how to use, that's fun to use, that I like using, that's easy, I want to use it at work to do my job. There is a subset of customers, of course, that have applications that only run on the Mac. That's primarily in the creative space. Less maintenance was cited, which I think might surprise some of the traditional IT managers on the webinar. They just take less to manage and maintain over time. Executive mandate and some security advantages kind of round up the big reasons why people are going Apple. So, so section 2 is why you should use Apple, and Kevin Eisen is going to take over here.
Thank you very much, Matt. So
I think that actually, let me interrupt, guys. I think that brings us to our first poll.
Oh, it does. Take it over, Mike.
So thank you, Matt. I think that was a great identification of the enterprise and who's using. But so we want to know from you all that are on the webinar. So the first poll is your organization considering officially using and supporting Apple devices in the near future? So the first option is yes. The other one is no, or we're already using the devices. If everyone could take a couple seconds and just very quickly select the radio button of your choice. We see that the polls are building right now. We're getting almost everybody. We'll give it just another 10 seconds or so. Okay, let's see what those results are. Okay, Matt, Kevin?
So let's see. So the majority of you, a slight majority, are already using Apple devices. That's not surprising. I'm surprised that it's only 54%. Most businesses today have Apple devices, and many IT organizations actually just don't know that they're being used in their environment. Everybody's got an iPhone in their pocket, for instance. There's a good, and then an even split between people who are considering a hybrid Apple and Windows model, and the IT department's just not ready to integrate Apple devices. And I think that second section, the people that don't feel like their IT department is ready, is the interesting part. And the question is why? Is it more of a political thing within the organization or a philosophical thing within the organization that the people that deliver IT services to the staff aren't just in the right mindset to say, okay, it's here, we're going to accept it? Or is it because kind of a lack of understanding or a lack of knowledge about the management frameworks that make it really easy to support this stuff? Easier, in fact, than I think the PC side of the equation.
Two of the things that come up a lot, Matt, and on that, know our IT department's going to manage it, is because of cost. People have this thought about cost, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. That Apple devices cost more money. And another thing that we're going to talk a little bit about today is security, right? And I see a couple of questions about security popping up, and we'll talk about those later. But those also come up into the yes, we're considering, and the no part is usually around those two elements.
All right.
So we talk about, those elements I just brought up. Why should you use an Apple device? There's all these different reasons why, and there's also reasons why not. It doesn't always fit in every organization. This is true. We're all used to maybe like the design firms and creative firms using Macs traditionally, but we showed earlier that other firms are using it in different ways. For everyone from education to the hospitals. And one thing that people stray away from is like, I don't want to spend this much dollars for a machine that I'm going to get rid of in whatever few months. And I think that's what the piece that most people don't think about is, the TCO for an Apple device generally is lower than it is for its counterpart on the other side, the Windows side, for example. And so they're easier to deploy using some of the services we're going to talk about, and they're actually easier to secure. As we move forward in this conversation, there's also aids for backup and recovery. That, again, there's traditional aids that are out there for Windows devices. Then there's built-in security and built-in backup support built into the Macintosh, for example. So if you open up a Mac, there's this piece called Time Machine. A lot of people probably don't use it, and they should. But you can tie a Time Machine back to a local hard drive. You can tie it back to a storage space that you might buy from a third party. You can tie it back to your corporate storage. And so you can use Time Machine to back up all your services. Really easy to use, and it's really easy right out of the box for people to address. And then security. Right now, top of mind to all of us if you're in IT is security, especially after the Sony pictures hacks and emails are out there for everyone to see. We never want that to happen under our watch, obviously. But just think about what's out there right now. If you think about how most of these attacks happen, oftentimes they happen through old software or through the browser. And just think about some facts that are out there. One, the way that Macs are built into a way that applications are sandboxed, are separate from the rest of the actual software and access points within the computer. And then secondly, the people that put together the OS X, they build these operating systems, and they actually push out the new versions so that every security flaw can be blocked and not have time to actually mature. So if you look at the current versions of Windows that are out there, there's more versions of Windows 7 and XP still in use than there are Windows 8 currently on the market. Versus if you look at the current OS X models that are out there, most people that are using a Mac are using the most current version. And that by itself helps security work better. Then finally, going back to TCO, if you look at, this is a real bold statement, but it's true. TCO for Macs is no higher than for Windows PCs. We took a chance in saying this, but we went and got other third parties to look at. If you look at InfoWorld, Tech Republic, ZDNet, Apple's discussion group, of course, and then Mac News, they all show different ways to calculate this. Depends, if we're talking about over time and just the user costs, if we're talking about how durable Macs are versus PCs, support costs in the long run, any which way you cut it. In our experience, what these other third parties are saying is true, is that the TCO for Macs is no higher than Windows PCs. And it's simply because in a lot of our cases, we're not dealing with security problems, not having to hire people to watch the desktop all the time, and the PC, and the Mac lasts longer than this counterpart. And on average, you do, if you do a technology refresh every 2 to 3 years, how many of those machines actually have to be forced out over time versus ones that you can resell on the marketplace? And that's the kind of conversation we're talking about with the Apple device. So when should you not use Apple? There's some industries that might not fit. There might be a political reason internally in your business. I know a couple companies right off the bat when the iPhone first came out, because it had a camera. Before they could actually lock down the camera, you couldn't bring that iPhone into the business for security reasons. Same thing for the iPhone, for the Apple Watch that's come out. People don't know what it can and can't do. Same thing happened with Google Glass, right? Some places won't allow for things that kind of record in their environment, and so that might be one reason. If you don't have the wherewithal to lock down some of those abilities, we'll show you how to do that. Then maybe there's a place to not have that in your environment. Also, sometimes just not having the right ability to manage it might block it for a time being. But again, we can show you how that you can unlock that. It's a matter of training or having the right tool set. Matt, you're the next part, the BYOD trends and risks. All yours, sir.
All right. So I have a problem with the title of this slide. So I don't believe that it's bring your own device as much as the consumerization of IT. I think it's, with the iPhone especially, it's such a personal device, and smartphones in general, really, Android too. They're in your pocket. You use them for everything, for pictures of your kids, to checking your work email. And you kind of expect that ease and simplicity with everything that you do on the personal side of the equation, with everything that you do in your work world. You press a button and you get an Uber sent to your door, and you want the same kind of immediacy and real time in your work world. So, the traditional model is expensive for organizations. They have to buy new and update old technology systems. They have to do their research, find that they have to make a bet on what vendor is going to be there. I think everybody on this call has experienced the rapid change of technology. It's month to month. Whatever you picked last month is going to be outdated. It's going to be second best. And that's all driven, I think, by the consumer side of the equation. So organizations, schools, governments, they're recognizing that technology and mobile, especially mobile, I think, changed the game here, can enhance learning. It gets data into your hand. It kind of activates you wherever you are so you can be more productive. And with the BYOD model, or going with user choice, organizations with limited resources, and who doesn't have a limited amount of resources, and tight budgets, and who doesn't have a tight budget, this is a cost-effective way to increase access to the technology that people want. And most employees just prefer to use their own device. Who wants? It used to be that executives had two phones, right? They had their work phone and their personal phone. It just is an idea that doesn't fly anymore. So, kind of unifying the device that you use for your entire life, work and personal, is something that everybody wants. So, BYOD trends and risks. The message here, the entire message really is it's happening whether your IT department is prepared or not. People are bringing in their iPad. People are bringing in their iOS device. They're bringing in their Surface Pro and everything else that they use at home, and they want access to the data that they use day to day to get their job done. So it's mobile device activations inside the enterprise space are up nearly 30% in the last year. That's actually a small number. It feels really small to me, but that's because the year prior it was 150%, and the year prior to that it was 250%. So wide adoption of mobile devices means a gigantic, titanic shift really in how we access data, how we manipulate data, and how we do our work. When it comes to total activations, like I said earlier, Apple's iOS is about 64% of all enterprise-related activations. And tablets, which has been talked about a lot lately, it's again reported to be about 64% of all activations. They did release an iPad Pro to kind of bridge that gap between the iPad and the full laptop. And I think that the conversation surrounding whether the iPad Pro is going to be a success or the iPad is it ready for work or not, all of that's immaterial. All of these devices, laptops, Surfaces, iPad Pros, iPads, iPhones, Android phones, they're all used for work, and it's about delivering the right data to the right screen size to the right people in a real-time manner. So you have to have a mobile strategy. You just have to with this trend. You have to figure out the right use cases. How are people going to activate the data that's on their phone? What is the most effective use of each screen size? The mobile development right now is centered on creating this model where what you deliver to an iPhone should be different than what you deliver to a tablet, which should be different than you deliver to a 27-inch screen for someone that's sitting at a desktop computer. And it's about what data is your app going to connect to? Is it going to be a native to each platform, or is it going to be a hybrid or web? But the bottom line is it's got to have an intuitive design. It's got to be easy. It's got to be quick. It's got to be simple. It's got to be evident. And so it's about innovation and enabling staff. So one thing that Kevin mentioned was that there's with Macs in particular versus PCs, there's less kind of management and maintenance needed. And what that does, we haven't seen any less work, right? No one on the call is feeling less work because Macs and iOS devices are out there. But what's happening is the conversation is shifting from, okay, my computer is broken, please fix it, to how do I use this computer to do what I need to do to get work done? How do I use Word? How do I use this vertical app? How do I use this line of business application most effectively? So what are the risks? 69% of Apple devices are unmanaged. I think this is just because of a lack of education. People think Macs are, there isn't a household name, a brand name out there that does management of Macintosh out of the box. 65% of Macs access sensitive customer information, of course, and 63% of Apple devices used for work are personally owned. So how do you manage Apple devices in the enterprise? How do you secure sensitive customer information, secure information in general, and how do you manage people's personal device? That is the kind of the big question here. Mike, I think we've got a poll for everybody.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Let's go to our second poll, and that is, do you think your IT department is capable of implementing a mobile device management strategy to support the BYOD Apple trend while keeping up with their day-to-day jobs, their day-to-day tasks? So first answer is yes, they can take it all and have no problem breaking a sweat. They are capable, but they need help in key areas. Or C, no, we need experts for this stuff. Please cast your vote. Most of you have already clicked. Waiting for just a couple other folks. Give that about 5 or 6 more seconds. Results still coming in, still coming in. And okay, let's close the poll and see what we've got. Okay, what do you guys see, Matt, Kevin?
So we see no, we need experts on this stuff for 22%. Then we have yes. So that's good. 35% of the people online right now can say they know how to do this. They know how to secure this trend that's happening, implementing the mobile device management strategy and support it. And then 43% they're capable and need help in these areas. Interesting, because that's about what we see. We probably see more on the no side, but I think more companies that are out there that traditionally supported this trend, or at least support devices that are allowing for the ability to manage BYOD devices. So that's good. That's good that people are seeing it out there.
Yeah, and I think geography can't be underestimated, right? So Kevin and I are sitting in San Francisco, and we have seen the trend take off earlier. It wasn't 3 or 4 years ago. It was 6 or 7 years ago here. And the majority of businesses that we interact with on the day-to-day have the majority of desktops on the desks, and the majority of laptops out there are Apple devices. And that trend started here. It's the hometown, kind of an internal bias here in the Bay Area. But it's really spreading. We have offices around the country, and what we're seeing is that LA, New York, Denver, even Boise. There's a client of ours in Boise that is a lumberyard, and they have 125 iPads out in the lumberyard so that people can do real-time management of inventory. And it's just kind of going from San Francisco and sweeping the country, I think.
So quick question, the way I look at these numbers, and I also see that 65% of those out there either need help or don't have it. The way that I look at that also is that they're focused on something else in their business. So maybe something more impactful, maybe they don't have the skill set or lack the training, but they're just focused on something else. So that 65% number, is that in line with what you guys have seen in the market today? Is it representative, or have you seen changes in that?
Across the country, Mike, yes, it is representative. But like I said, geographies are different. In San Francisco, it would be 90% yes, they can take it on. But what I think this points out is that people are still fighting fires, right? They're like, hey, this is new. It's something that I'm going to have to kind of manage a tectonic shift in how we think. I don't see the benefit maybe, or it's scary because it's new and I've got too much work to take on already. And I think that is the number one reason I've seen resistance across the country to introducing kind of an acceptance or management framework surrounding Apple is just lack of education. It's like, okay, this is new, it's going to be hard, I'm going to have to get staff trained, and we've already got too much to do, so this is low down on the priority list, which is understandable.
Mm-hmm.
The message that I've got for you is that implementing Apple, especially on the desktop, actually makes your job easier. There's less work to do on the implementation of new devices, or the kind of management and maintenance of your existing stock of technical equipment goes down, and you can focus on more innovative things and more interesting things, frankly.
So you can focus on the things that your CEO and CIO want you to do to support the business as opposed to being reactive to fixing stuff. That's what it really allows those CIOs and CEOs that are woken up and said, hey, bring whatever they need to make them more productive, have seen that actually happen, because this stuff gets out of their way.
Great. All right, I think the next section is support around Apple's and Windows environments.
That is. So that's this is Kevin again talking. So it's funny when you think about how can you organize support for Apple and Windows environment, like that mixed environment, which we're all going to see. How do you prepare your organization? There's a lot of ways. We can talk through a lot of different ways here, and we're going to walk through those. But a lot of people don't know that Apple has this built in now into their whole scenario and environment and how they roll out their models. And it's funny because this didn't exist 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Part of it didn't. Piece parts and how you can actually get volume license from Apple, all that existed. But now how you do it today versus 3 years ago is so vastly different. And the program called device enrollment is a model that's fairly new. But I just walked through this very briefly with everyone on the call. You now have the ability to reach out to your Apple team, wherever they are. It could be in a retail store, it could be the enterprise team, it could be online. And they can design a model for you that gives you the tools to buy not only Mac apps, iOS apps in bulk, but applications that you would use like from Autodesk and from other companies. You can buy them and actually deploy them custom for your business. So you can have them go through the VPP, the Volume Purchase Program. They will actually live in a database that Apple owns. You would actually tie that to, before an unboxed machine, you can have it, the serial number will be tied to your custom order. And when you open up the box, when you hit your network, your software will download.
And I think that this way, you decide to go Apple, you enroll in the device enrollment program and the volume purchase program. So, you've got this device enrollment program where it's a database of all devices that you've purchased. As soon as you buy it, it's tagged to your company. And then you're in the volume purchase program, which is, okay, here's all the software that gets delivered to each Apple product that gets purchased. And you buy the device through whatever purchasing process you have. You can send it to somebody's house, you can send it to an office in Stockholm, you can send it to an office in Denver or Boise or New York or wherever. People get that Apple device just like they have before. They cut off the plastic, they open the box, they turn the machine on, and the first screen is a setup screen. And as soon as you configure it to connect to a network, downloads the apps that you should have, and it sets that computer up, configuration and otherwise, for your business. And so there's this belief, there's a traditional model on the PC side of imaging and deployment that has never worked well. Right. And it's always been challenging to manage. And Apple's kind of broken that down and made it actually work real time. I was not a believer of these two programs until I saw Kevin demo it for me, and it blew me away. It's much easier than anything on the PC side.
Exactly. The only thing you're going to need on your side is some type of device management system. So we're going to talk about that right now. So the one that we use a lot on our side is Jamf's Casper Suite. There's others out there, Centrify, but Jamf has gone right alongside Apple as they've grown in their business. They've been out there with them, helping design the model around which the machines can be deployed, right? So you have an iOS device. So how do you lock down part of it for BYOD, but keep part of it open so you can use it in your environment? Well, Jamf has worked out with Apple and has access to before the machine comes out, how do we set it up so we can actually open it up for the masses, but shut it down for a corporation, right? So, and Centrify has done the same thing. They were later to market than Jamf was on the iOS and on the OS X side, but now they're also one that we like to use simply because they can work not only on the Apple device, they can work on the Windows, Linux device as well.
And one thing that we've seen a lot is people use the Casper Suite by Jamf as in tandem with SCCM on the PC side. Yeah. It really is it's not a monitoring and management system as much as it is a total life cycle management system. And it does some interesting things around licensing and usage of those licenses that would be really interesting to the folks in the CFO office. Centrify really has focused traditionally more on integrating Apple to Active Directory environments and pushing group policies on the Windows side of the equation out into configuration policies on the Apple side. So, how can your organization support both an Apple and Windows environment? The reality of the truth is you're already doing it. You don't feel like you have the time or the resources, and most people don't have the experience, especially with a kind of a best practices enterprise framework for managing and implementing Apple devices in businesses. So, of course, we're not a big fan of having break-fix shops or so-called Apple experts go in and, in a very tactical manner, go into your enterprise and kind of set up the Apple device. They have Apple knowledge, as in they know the operating system and they know Apple as a business, but they're not best practices people. There are a lot of big break-fix shops out there on the PC side too, but on the Apple side, traditionally you have a lot of people who are really Apple fanboys like myself, and they don't know how to approach things in a systemic, holistic way, in a total life cycle way. So what's the answer? You've got a managed service provider. So when your internal IT department is kind of too overwhelmed, you call a consultancy. By using somebody who's got that enterprise experience and the Apple knowledge, you can offer the freedom of BYOD and allow people to use the device that they really want, but you can control it. You can put it in a framework within which they can do whatever they want, but you have this box of control that kind of provides the security and kind of the control you need. So, an MSP usually has 24/7 for all Windows and Apple devices. You've got OS 10, you've got iOS, you've got iPads, you've got iPhones. You don't want to send the folks out on your staff to learn this entire new world as much as you want to free your staff up to focus on the business needs of your firm. When you're shopping for an MSP, you're going to want to do a little bit more digging than do you have some Apple experience or do you have a couple of certs? Because one thing that I've seen a lot is there are, traditionally in the MSP space, there are Apple shops that are usually small and local, and they call them managed service providers, but really they're break-fix shops. And then in the PC world, you have firms that hire one Apple guy, and they say, yeah, we support Apple. We know all about it. But what they have is a hobbyist that works for them that knows how to, all of the kind of cool shortcuts on the Apple devices, but they don't know the management framework. They don't know that kind of enterprise. They don't have that enterprise expertise or the best practice knowledge to combine the two. You want an MSP that kind of has Apple in its DNA, but also has best practices, knowledgeable staff, and the ability to think bigger.
So what have we seen? So I want to make sure, I want to do a quick time check here because I want to give you guys time to ask some questions from us. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, just Kevin. In about 4 minutes, I want to walk through some of what we've seen out there, give you some examples of clients that we have in place today that love us, that helped us through, that we've been around for a while, to walk them through from birth to who they are now, but with Apple devices or hybrids thereof of all the different things that are out there. So the first one we're going to talk about is a local San Francisco design firm, architecture design firm that we recently started doing business with, mainly because they decided themselves that they want to go all Mac. And so they were a traditional architecture firm. They realized that being in San Francisco, LA, and Salt Lake, that they needed to actually up their game, frankly, right, and start doing some other things like design and branding and websites, et cetera. And so the problem that they run into was just that they had this kind of band-aided version of Windows that grew with them as they've grown over the last 20 years, and they changed their name and they wanted to be something different. So they still had that legacy technology in place, which was hurting them. They also had, again, the desire to be an Apple technology for a couple of reasons, And one of those main reasons they wanted to go to Apple is because the people that they wanted to hire wanted Apple devices in their hands to do their job. And then that was big for them to get the best of breed people that wanted to work in their studios. And so what we did for them is we kind of re-looked at their entire network, realized they needed to have best of breed wireless, so we put in Meraki Ignite Cloud services to match to help them with their remote folks that are working, so that they not always have to come back to their servers. We give them some on-site support, remote help desk, and of course Jamf. We do Jamf there a little differently. We do it as a service, so we give them the ability to bring on board people with all the services of Jamf without having a major capital outlay. And then they took their old equipment, some of it that you might want to just give away and say, oh well, I'm not going to make any money for this, and we turn that into, we have to make that part of a lease. So right now that client is growing, and we're going to grow along with them with that network. Another one that we have, and again, I need to go through these pretty quickly for you, but this one, if you want to reach out to a great client, this is Pop, also was known at one time as Pop Sugar. They are now 350 people. We started with them when they were a hobby business. And so none of it is now, they're multifaceted. They have a mixed environment, but mainly Mac. But we're also helping them with their full-on MPLS, their TV production. We augment their IT staff. Again, Jamf as a service. Meraki, we watch all their network through Enable. So this is a great example of a worldwide company being managed centrally because there's tools out there to be able to do it.
One interesting thing about Pop is they decided that they wanted to be more enterprise-centric, and they had an initiative to go to introduce more PCs into their environment, and it was a disaster. They did best practices. They set up the right systems. They had knowledgeable staff, and their costs increased. So they went back to 95% Mac in the last year and a half, I think, and it's been easier for them.
And we'll go over one last one. Again, we like talking to clients that we've had for a while, and when they grow, they want to do something different. That's what we do with them. So this one's interesting. Timbuktu, 16 locations worldwide, including Iceland. We support them too there. Right now, they're focused really on a custom experience for their loyal clientele. And the problems they ran into over time was how do you maintain certain margins with the type of business they're in? Retail, as we know, can be difficult. Lots of data to manage, so they have a lot of data from different places that they want to utilize so they have to give a better customer experience. And they have a mixed environment. So we not only that we take and look at all their IT equipment, but we re-look their business model. We're a business partner with them. And so we not only use the tools that we talked about today, Jamf and a couple of other systems that are out there, but we also talk to them about what do they want to be when they grow up, right? What kind of support do they want in their offices? So they thought about, what about iBeacon? What about the Internet of Things situations that are out there that people are talking about, but I haven't seen it work yet? Well, that's deployed in some of their offices now. We help deploy that, and we're managing that centrally as well. So iBeacon with Meraki, with all the Apple devices, is now part of their overall model going forward. That's one of the case studies. We have others that we can talk about, but we're going to save downtime to talk to you about the business that you're in. Mr. Bank.
So folks, we just want to ask a real quick question just to kind of help us with the quality of this webinar. We're going to go right into Q&A right after this quick poll. So if everyone could give us just a little bit of feedback of what they thought of the webinar, and let us know if overwhelmingly you enjoyed it and you want to know when the next webinar is, if you'd like us to follow up and need some clarification, or if, quite frankly, you need a cup of coffee. Just real quickly, we want to hear your feedback, and then we're going to go right into Q&A here in about 5 seconds. We did receive a number of questions from folks. So let's close the poll right now. And I think that we've got a slide here. This is kind of a wrap-up. We want to urge everyone to ask their questions now and send them in. As a reminder, you are talking to two individuals that are very well renowned in the space of managed services and respectfully with Apple. the organization, the consultancy as a whole manages about 6,000 Apple endpoints today. So there probably isn't much that you're going to ask that we haven't seen, and we want to urge you to do so. We also want to let everybody know that we are a member of the Apple Consultant Advisory Council, which is a very exclusive council that we've got a seat at the table. And whether it is mobility devices, whether it's other endpoint devices, if it's security of Apple, we want to hear from you. We want to hear questions about support, total cost of ownership. So with that said, I'm going to go to the first question for Matt and for Kevin, and that is, I work in a high school IT department. We're adopting the iPad as a main learning tool from September. Some of the classrooms will start using it in the class. The students will bring in their own iPad, so we will have a BYOD situation. What is the best way to manage these devices? This isn't in the question, but I would imagine that might be from data content, it might be access, and it might be from security. So
Definitely. So thanks, Mike. This is Kevin. So it's awesome about that question is that school is progressive, and they're looking at ways to get their school to move forward in an environment where iPad is what they touch every day when they come home. They're obviously going to look at that. A lot of kids look at Netflix right now rather than looking at the big screen. And so what my answer to that is there's multiple services that are out there, but going back to we were talking about Jamf. Jamf offers not only a corporate model, they also offer a BYOD model that allows you to separate the apps from those that are corporate, in this case the school, and those that are personal. And so you can actually track those separately. You can't delete the apps that you don't connect to the corporation. So if they're personal, it cannot be deleted. And there's a way to set it up within the mainframe of the iPad. You can build that inside the Jamf compliance model. And the great thing about Jamf is they actually offer an education discount. And so the price that you might see online are going to be different for education, and they also offer large district discounts as well. And so it's a great way to get started. You can actually start with as little as 10 devices and grow into it. That would be my first recommendation when I heard that question.
Okay. The next person has 3 questions that have come in. So these are actually all pretty good. The first one, what about repairs for Macs? With corporate PCs, we can get next business day repair anywhere in the U.S. I think that is in regards to Dell dropship. But for Macs, you must schedule a Genius Bar appointment, sometimes several days out. Can Apple compete with Dell next business day repair? We found that Macs are no more reliable from a hardware standpoint. While there is maintenance, how can we get the turnaround time that we're used to with Dell? This might be a good discussion, Matt and Kevin.
Yeah.
We'll possibly look at a managed service.
Well, there's a couple different angles here. One is, you're right, 5 years ago, I as the Apple fanboy on the call was incensed. I was like, well, you can just get somebody the next day to repair your hardware. But with Apple, it wasn't even Genius Bar 5, 6 years ago. It was like, where do you go? Some local Mac shop. And that's changed. So there is Apple Care for Enterprise, which Apple hasn't done a very good job of marketing, but it's a fairly new program. And when you purchase that, it is essentially the same thing as these other programs by other vendors. So not only do you get on-site repair, you can do next day, you can do 4 hours, the same kind of thing that you get with all of these other programs, but you can also just replace 10% of your inventory for whatever reason you want. So you don't have to call them and make a case, and there isn't this back and forth with Dell in particular about, well, it's water damage, it was my fault, it was not my fault. Apple will just say, hey, there's 10%, you can just do it, and we're not going to worry about it. So Apple Care for Enterprise is a big shift in the last, I'd say, 2 years in how Apple is addressing the enterprise. And make no mistake, Apple has focused in the last 24 months with the deal with IBM and more recently the deal with Cisco on doing the things that enterprises require to make things work really well. And there's another angle. If you deal with an MSP, if you go through an MSP for services for Apple product, any good MSP is going to have a bank of equipment as swap outs, as loaners, and also be able to deliver that on-site hardware repair if you need it.
There's another way that it can be solved for too. So if you're a smaller business, and this is not, if you're an MSP, this might not sound great to you, but Apple offers another service called a joint venture.
Oh yeah.
Right. If you're a smaller business and you wanted to, I heard the question about the Genius Bar. They have a separate queue for the Genius Bar for joint venture members. Right. And so oftentimes that queue is not full, and you want to go into the store and have it repaired. You can bring it to any store worldwide. I don't care if you bought it in San Francisco and you're sitting in Hong Kong, because I've done that before. Yeah, if you have a machine that's not working, you're part of the joint venture model, you go online, you sign up for the separate queue that's part of what you purchased with joint venture, and you can set the meeting. They go and do diagnostics on your machine. They have a loaner program. If your machine isn't working, they'll give you one while they fix that one. So there's a couple options for you depending on your business model, on your business needs.
Good. Here's another one. How can you erase corporate data from BYOD as compared to corporate devices?
That's a pretty probably doesn't seem like it, but it's a softball question because you have JAM. You have a management tool that allows you to sandbox corporate data from your personal data, and it's got a facility in the tool to do that.
That's it.
And that's a gigantic need for any business, really. Even if you're not BYOD, guaranteed people are getting email on their home devices and the devices that are in their pocket.
There are other companies out there that do something like it, and a lot of different companies do it a different way. So Jamf does it a different way than Mass 360, for example. IBM bought Mass 360 a couple of years ago, and they also they actually build a separate framework within your iOS device. That's the only place you can go for, all your email goes there, all your corporate information goes into this one separate app inside your machine. There's another way to solve for it with Mass 360. But there's like 4 different ways that 4 different companies can do it, but all of them separate that data for you.
Okay, here's an interesting one. I just saw on the slide that Synoptek is part of the Apple Consultants Network. Does that mean you guys work for Apple?
No, not yet anyway. Who knows? But the Apple Consultants Network has kind of a long and not so storied history. It was the default partner program for people who were knowledgeable in Apple gear, much like Microsoft Partner Program, Cisco Partner Program, VMware Partner Program. But it was really a hobbyist club. It was the kind of folks that just were Apple through and through, no matter what. They'd go into a 1,000-person business and say you should get Apple Extreme Airports and set up a wireless network and things like that. They never saw a problem that Apple couldn't solve. But in the last 2 years, as Apple's refocused on actually delivering enterprise frameworks to the enterprise, they have shifted that program significantly. And I'm on the board of the Apple Consultants Network, and I hate tooting my own horn, but I was really a vocal member saying, hey, the hobbyists are great. They need a separate program, but this should be a program for people who are focused on delivering quality services to enterprises in a best practices manner, and anybody that's not on that train needs to get off it. And they've done that. Starting in 2016, they're actually kicking everybody out, and everybody's got to reapply. And the folks that have a management framework and an organizational structure to deliver best practices, always on, 24-hour support, in tools-based, systematic support of Apple devices are the only ones that are going to make that top tier. Although we don't work with Apple, we work really closely with them, and we get a little bit of visibility into what's coming down the pike. But more often than not, we're actually telling them what needs to come down the pike, and that's been the most gratifying thing to me. We are the people that have experience in delivering services in the Apple world. They don't have a services arm like IBM does. So they're coming to us and saying, hey, what do you see in the marketplace? And we tell them, and they're starting to listen. They're starting to structure their delivery offerings with that in mind.
That's it. One thing I would add to that is every large corporation that has partnerships has some level of, you have to do X to maintain your partnership, right? Microsoft, Cisco, name them. If you're going to be a partner, you have to maintain some level of credibility. You have to be on the up and up on the things that you do to support the business, right? And so we have people that have to go through a testing environment and learn about not only how Mac works, but an iOS device works, but keep in mind we're also developers, so developers have to be on the up and up on how the SDKs work and stuff like that. So to be part of that network, or whether it's, if you're in Microsoft, you have to know Azure, you have to know how all the different components of Microsoft works. It's the same idea across the board. If you're supporting a large enterprise, you have to maintain your credibility and your credentials.
Good, thanks guys. All right, well, we are at the top of the hour. There are a number of extra questions, and what I would encourage, I think we've got a slide here for our contact if you want to reach out to us directly. Anything and everything will either get you in the right hands of a subject matter expert. If there's a question that was not answered and we can follow up with you, please let us know. There is a request to have the deck sent out, so if you would like that, please reach out to us. I believe there's Matt's contact information, my contact information. I think Michael Brinks, who sent out the invite, you have that as well. We will respond quickly. I'd like to thank the two panelists, Matt and Kevin, for your time. I'd like to thank everybody. I hope that you came away with what you were seeking. And again, if there's any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to us directly. Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks everybody.